Hello everyone, welcome to a second thoughts overview of Thorgrim Grudgebearer of the Dwarfs. I went through the initial turns and observed the victory conditions, starting location, diplomacy, mechanics, buildings, units, etc. And I took my own conclusions about how the faction plays, their strengths and weaknesses. In the later parts of this video I will show you what army compositions I will do and why. This is what I do before a campaign, what I check out for while making my plans of conquest. A disclaimer, it should not be considered a fully in-depth guide, and although it may help you out a lot, and please do comment below with your thoughts. Without further ado, let's go play Thorgrim Grudgebearer. So here we are. For the short campaign victory, we need to complete at least one major grudge from the Great Book of Grudges. Without going too much into the mechanics right now, that implies winning 5 battles against the Crooked Moon or conquering Black Crag, for example. We also need to occupy, loot, raise or sack 30 different settlements. Completing this, it will reward us with +3 hero capacity for all heroes. It is always a nice reward. Like I said in the previous video, it should help avoiding having too many buildings for that purpose earlier on. Should we continue with the long victory conditions, we will be required to achieve the short victory and to occupy, loot, raise or sack 70 different settlements. We also need to ensure that the total severity of grudges in the Great Book of Grudges is no greater than 9. This is the tricky part, without once more going too much into it yet. You will see in a few moments. However, in general the campaign feels quite good because of its replay value, but do not by any means think that you will have no directions or when to expend. The grudges will do that, and it will feel less of a sandbox game for that. The reward is nice to ensure your heroes are strong as you recruit them, especially once you achieve this long campaign victory. Thorgrim himself offers some quality buffs, a chance to receive additional random rewards for every grudge resolved, and some diplomatic relations with dwarves. This will ensure you that you have some possibilities for confederation earlier on, and some early trade. Upkeep for Longbeards and Hammerers, and some recruit rank for Hammers ensure that those units will be useful throughout the campaign. And finally, all commandments have more powerful effects, which goes into the lore, let's say, of Mr. Thorgrim, of becoming a massive leader and creator of a mighty empire. In terms of climate, there are a lot of unpleasant and uninhabitable climates to look out for. Be wary of your intended expansion going into these types of climates, but for the most part, actually, you can stick to the mountains and the Badlands for a great sprawling empire. Just be wary of going into the north, or you will have those pesky debuffs. Those you can see right here. The initial province is comprised of 3 settlements, and it is highly defensible, nearly 2 avenues of attack. There are almost no 4 settlement provinces nearby. This implies that you may always have to use 2 provinces to access your full military. Typical expansion will either go into the northern area or the south area. However, you do run the risk of overexpansion or creating too many front lines, so be mindful of that. There are also great mines to be used, so when expanding, take advantage of those for a good old income. Now the first enemy is rather easy, and then Crooked Moon or even the Skaven nearby will become your next enemy, so be careful with overextension and plan wisely, as whenever you expand, it is supposed that other enemies will show up. In terms of diplomacy, you are part of the Order Tide. The Empire, Bretonnia, the High Elves, Kislev, and even faraway Cathay will provide you with some good allies and some nice outpost potential. Your typical enemies will be Greenskins and Skaven. Earlier on, of course, but the more you expand, the more you should be able to contend against the Tomb Kings, Scarbrand, or the likes of the vampires such as Vlad, Chaos will show up from the north should you expand a lot to the northern area as well, so be wary of that. Most greenskins and Skaven factions will declare on you very soon after you meet them, so be prepared and have none of them as neighbors. As for outposts, you should be wary of anything that has cavalry, which will greatly assist you. The Empire Cavalry, Bretonnia, or even Kislev should provide very good additions to your armies. The Forge is a crafting mechanic, basically. You collect oath gold via many means, such as battles, buildings, and characters. And you can craft items that reshape your heroes and lords. One of the main types of items is actually runes, either character runes or banner runes, that can change drastically a unit, encouraging different compositions and more variety. The Great Book of Grudges is the second mechanic, and it provides missions in the form of grudges to be settled, such as the Mad Rodent Grudge that you're seeing here, which basically implies that I need to win 5 battles against the faction of Clan Moors. Rewards in Oath Gold are always useful. Having too many grudges will incur both some bonuses and penalties. Having too little, and you have mostly good bonuses with just a lower chances, like you see there, of recruiting slayers or of them being added to the Regiments of Renown pool. Let me show you this. There we go. You can see that there's a 5% and a 10%, precisely because I have a very low chance at this moment, since the severity is only at 11. Do not forget that this value is important to be low in order to obtain the long victory achievement, because you need to ensure that the total severity of grudges is no greater than 9. Another specific mechanic of sorts is how the dwarfs have a different sort of magic system. Don't let them know I called it that. Instead of casting winds of magic, it just has shared cooldowns with all other casters, implying with this that for the most part, 1 caster per army is quite enough. As for province edicts, there is a control and corruption one, an income from all buildings, recruit cost and local recruitment capacity. Notice that the recruitment cost is severely lowered, much better than the Empire one. Of course, we also have one of the best ones, growth, construction costs, and faction-wide tradable resources, all the good things that we love and like. All of these are very good, especially under Thorgrim, who buffs them. Very game-changing, and it is worth it to check every now and then to ensure we are maximizing this. Now, in terms of army stances, we have the typical encamp and raid for 50% movement. And we also have ambush for 25, because the dwarves have the underway mechanic. This is most likely one of the best mechanics there is. An excellent way of bypassing difficult terrain to spawn an attack. It's really, really good. It does require that you have no movement points spent in that turn, though. Overall, a good tactical array of stances.Karek has 3 special buildings, all quite useful, especially the mine. We need 6 buildings for maximum military, and only 2 can be built on a minor settlement. Most likely, you'll need 2 provinces for a full military. There are no Tier 5 units, which means that the dwarves reach their elite troops much earlier than other factions. In addition, they have great Tier 2 choices with the Grudge Throwers and the Quarrelers. There are no other units actually locked behind any secondary building, which is also very nice. As for infrastructure, we have a growth and casualty replenishment building, income building, control and some trade building, and also a trade with some oath gold generating building. Great solutions and alternatives for your provinces to keep controlled and productive. Mount Gunbad has a nice special building with some great income, but special attention to the recruit rank of artillery units. This should be a great province to have a foundry in order to build all your artillery from here. In addition, Carrick 8 Peaks, because of these two buildings, with so much casualty replenishment rate, should be a very nice staging area where you return just to replenish your armies as you conquer the area around. Research is one of the best around. However, it is time-consuming, as it will buff mostly income and campaign stuff here, 2 sections, and army section over here, such as recruitment costs and leadership, some armor, etc. Lots of buffs. Just to let you know, if you select here, you can actually see that it will take so long, 62 turns, for even getting just these technologies. So it's worthwhile to invest in some nice research rate buffs. As always, 4 basic areas for skills: the legendary or character specific, the combat or magic skills, the army or red line, and the blue line or the campaign line if you prefer. Thorgrim does add some nice buffs to his army as well as for the campaign. Special note to his grudges, helping his lord's army versus a number of foes. Blue line is rather expensive here, has little to offer besides some replenishment, and the last one, Inquiring Mind, with some research rate and upkeep costs. One of the best, but still it may prove to be too expensive for you in terms of skill point allocation. The red line is where the dwarfs actually shine. It allows different compositions without spending too many skill points. So without offering too many alternatives here, I'll show you some army compositions that of course you will be able to see just how little you have to spend to buff so many troops. As for lords, the fact that you have only lords or runed lords is slightly bad. And even then, the Rune Lords require some of the magic, at least, to be useful. So most of the time, you'll be better off using your Rune Smith hero that provides, your magic of sorts, instead of actually using a Rune Lord. But it is up to you, of course. Speaking of heroes, there are none that offer replenishment. One of the things that I like the most. It helps to keep the campaign going. Unfortunately, but they do add specific abilities, such as the Master Engineer and the Runesmith for specific units. I'll show you an example with the Master Engineer. So the Master Engineer actually has some options, some buffs for your artillery or missile troops. They increase the accuracy or reload skill, the missile strength, the ammunition, etc. He even has an ability to replenish your ammunition, which is always nice. Perfect to send these guys in the middle of your artillery or gun line. In terms of the Dwarven Redline skills, here we have them, as well as the units that are influenced by them. Special note to Fire and Fury here and Grimnin's Hairs. This is because they mostly encompass all of the elite units that they have, and you can do a lot of compositions just with this. So let's see what I can, shall we? In terms of army compositions, here are some ideas for Thorgrim. I typically like to have a Runesmith and a Master Engineer in my armies. Thorgrim buffs Hammerers and Longbeards, reduced upkeep, and some artillery units, so of course I can try some combinations of that. Do not forget that Hammerers and Longbeards are already buffed by the faction itself. These are the compositions I'll try out for Thorgrim, for some good old fun. Now notice the double engineers here. This is to ensure maximum effectiveness from your artillery pieces. Place them in their midst, and every single one of them suffers from their buffs. The yellow number here, as always, is the number of red line skill points required to buff all these troops. Quite effective at 15 here, as you can see. Now there's a lot of variety that can be found, but you can never go wrong with some Iron Breakers, Hammerers, Slayers, or some Iron Drakes in some artillery. There's several compositions that you may try, and you can see they're all very inexpensive in terms of the amount of redline skills that you need to use. Longbeards especially, on this second page as you can see, will provide you with some nice different options. They're much cheaper as well. These will be perfect armies to fight anything that doesn't survive, or that survives your initial armies, you know, the strongest armies that you have, and you can just clean up with these ones following. That will be much cheaper, basically. Gyrocopters, the special note on those, they're actually nice to fight with, but they're terrible versus flyers and require extensive micro. Be wary of that while playing. For the most part, in terms of your missiles, I often like two options. Either using hammers and quarrelers, or using the Iron Drakes options, as they are buffed by different ones. As final analysis, possibly one of the richest factions of the game, due to the nearby mines. Take them early, such as Black Crag here and Mount Gumbat. They all provide some nice income. Rune magic is quite interesting as well. Even though it is mostly just buffs and debuffs, they're quite useful. It lacks damage though. The army itself suffers from being quite slow. It is difficult to flank, and if you have to advance on the enemy, you may take casualties. One of the best army rosters, however, to benefit from outposts. Their army tough and reliable infantry, good artillery and missiles, no cavalry, no typical magic, and no single entities. They enjoy, however, plenty of replay value, just because of the location and somewhat sandbox faction. The victory objectives, they're very interesting, but leave you to whatever you wish to do. You can replay it, decide to go on a different location. Certainly, one faction that shall give you plenty of fun for many hours. I guess it's time to play Thorgrim Grudgebearer.